ChatGPT is sending your messages to the police. X/Twitter is rolling out some encrypted messaging that's within its own messaging that we'll discuss. Lots of politics this week and more. Again, we want to welcome you all to Surveillance Report 240, where we're dedicated to keeping you private and secure and safe out there with the latest news in the past week. I'm Henry from Techlore.
I'm Nathan from The New Oil.
And we haven't had one of these because we've had so many awesome sponsors, but we just have a generic promo segment for you all. We wouldn't be able to be so selective with our sponsors if it wasn't for people who have been supporting us on Patreon this whole time, who are joining us for our Q&As, who are tipping us Monero, who are tipping us in LibraPay, and we're just super grateful for all of you. So if you're a weekly listener to this podcast and you get value from it, we really do still appreciate all of your support, and we couldn't do this podcast without that support. If you do join us on Patreon, you get access to an exclusive episode where we give a lot more of our commentary on things and analysis, which I'm sure we're going to have a lot of today. And if you just want a one-off way to support us, we do just have Monero via XMR chat as well down in the description. So go and support the podcast down below if you like what we're doing. Otherwise, just enjoy the episode. And then Nate has a short announcement because we have a new support method.
For those of you who may be thinking to yourself, like, man, I would love to support you on Patreon because I want the perks and it sounds really cool, but screw Patreon, which is a totally fair take for the record. We now have a Ghost. For those of you who don't know, Ghost is an open source platform. It's really similar to like Patreon or Substack. Like, I really don't know how else to describe it, except it is open source. It is federated with ActivityPub. We've actually talked about that quite a few times here on this podcast because they've been rolling that out. It's still a pretty new feature, but it is a thing. 404 Media uses Ghost, and we quote from them quite a bit. There's a lot of different platforms. So it's a really, really great platform. It's a lot better than Patreon for both creators and fans. It does still go through Stripe, just FYI. So it's not like totally KYC free or anything like Monero is, but it is, again, a much better alternative than Patreon. It's a better company, I would argue. So yeah, right now it's a 1-to-1 copy of Patreon. The tiers are the same. The prices are the same. So if you're on Patreon and you want to stay there, that's totally fine. You're not going to lose anything by not switching over. Check it out. Yeah, hope you guys enjoy it.
Okay, and without further ado, let's get into the highlight story of the week, which comes from OpenAI, who is behind ChatGPT, and they are saying that they're scanning users' conversations and reporting content to the police. Now, this is probably another story that many of you go, well, duh, because you listen to this podcast weekly, so I have a story that you can point to your friends and family, so this is still very important to talk about. So this is a blog post that admits certain failures amid its users' mental health crisis. OpenAI also quietly disclosed that it's now scanning users' messages for certain types of harmful content, escalating particularly worrying content to human staff for review, and in some cases reporting it to the cops. When we detect users who are planning to harm others, we route their conversations to specialized pipelines where they are reviewed by a small team trained on our usage policies and who are authorized to take action. If human reviewers determine that a case involves an imminent threat of serious physical harm to others, we may refer it to law enforcement. This is from a quote from the article. That short and vague statement leaves a lot to be desired. Their usage policies referenced as the basis on which the human review team operates don't provide much more clarity than that. And then the final quote before we give more commentary here. In the post, warning users of the company will call the authorities if they seem like they're going to hurt someone. OpenAI also acknowledged that it is currently not referring self-harm cases to law enforcement to respect people's privacy, given the uniquely private nature of ChatGPT interactions. Of course, we wanted to approach this as sensitively as possible, as you should with people in your life, because when it comes to things like self-harm as well as harming others, this gets into a very tricky debate of like privacy versus what, like overall societal well-being. I don't know what the exact comparison is there. Safety, yeah. And this is like a legitimate safety versus privacy debate here. This isn't like the false stuff that we hear from politicians all the time. I think really my take on this, and I'm sure Nate has one as well, is this is kind of the situation that you get put in when you're a company that collects an overwhelming amount of data. So this whole debate and this whole issue that is even being had in the first place originates from a company that literally has access to all of your thoughts, your feelings, opinions, all in one place. This is why I really prefer zero-knowledge services. I prefer services like Proton. I prefer services like Signal. I prefer services that actively go out of their way to not collect this information because it's not their business. When a service starts collecting all this information, they are now kind of held liable for that. So my guess is actually that OpenAI already is a privacy invasive company. This isn't them trying to be more privacy invasive. This is a liability thing. this is the kind of thing where if enough people start causing harm and getting advice about how to harm others on their platform, they're going to get shut down by the government. And so this is their way of staying compliant, of staying liable, and it's something they have to do because they collect all this data that they do have access to. So those are my initial opinions on this, kind of just reading the story.
Apparently, he started off using ChatGPT for like homework and completely innocuous things. And then over time, because ChatGPT is like very natural language, he started to confide in it more and about like his mental health and his struggles. The article that I read included some of his actual conversation. And what's frustrating is none of it is bad advice per se, but because ChatGPT is not actually sentient, it didn't have the recognition to recognize like this is a serious situation and someone is seriously in trouble. So like at one point he asked ChatGPT like, should I go tell my mom about how I've been feeling? And ChatGPT was like, no, like, you know, you don't want to worry your parents unnecessarily. Context for people who are just joining us. That is absolutely why OpenAI is doing this, because somebody died under their watch. They are now being sued. And yeah, it's a really heartbreaking story to read. With all that context in mind, I kind of agree with Henry that this is a legitimate debate over where is the line between privacy and someone's safety. I feel like this is such a delicate thing because on the one hand, like you can do a lot of good by catching this stuff early and reporting it. That also really gives me conflicted feelings on the end there where they're not currently referring self-harm cases to law enforcement because of privacy. It's like, okay, but like, I don't know. That's just, I mean, that is my take. Is this is a really, we chose the hot take story.
Yeah.
That is my take is you really nailed it when you're like, this is a legitimate debate over where is the line between someone's privacy and their safety. And, you know, again, referring back to some people, they just need to get through that dark moment and they'll be okay. So like, does that okay violating their privacy? I don't know. I don't think there's any answer I could give here that'll make people happy. Because if I say like privacy is more important, now I'm demeaning people's lives. If I say like saving people's lives is more important, then now it's like we always make the slippery slope argument of like, okay, right now we're just using it for, it's the same argument they make about backdooring encryption, right? You know, it's like, oh, we're just going to use it for like terrorism and drugs and CSAM. And then over time it also becomes, and by the way, we used it to catch this criminal. And the next thing you know, we're cracking down on like peaceful protests. So I don't know. It's a blurry line for sure. And it's really unfortunate, but it's also something that people need to be aware of. As you did mention, there are local LLMs. There's, you know, Protons, Lumo. There's like the proxy, like Leo and Duck AI. I do want to be clear, like we're not trying to condone anything bad, but just pointing out that like, if you are doing something where privacy is your concern, like any kind of sensitive research or anything, first of all, you probably shouldn't be using AI for that if we're being honest, but, you know, just be aware of what your trade-offs are with the tools you're using, I think.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's multiple takeaways from this story. I think the obvious one, this is regardless of the sensitive topics in the story, ChatGPT collects all your messages. So takeaway number one, if you want something with better privacy, use some of the services that Nate just mentioned. Two, it is worth discussing the debate of, well, if a company is collecting all this data, what kind of moral obligation do they have to get involved? Even if it comes at the cost of privacy. Services that Nate mentioned kind of get around that problem, so they don't even have to ask that moral debate because they, in theory, shouldn't be having access to that data in the first place.
If you are feeling upset and thinking of doing anything drastic, a good use of an LLM would be to find actual help resources run by humans, like a hotline or I think there's probably chat rooms nowadays, websites, like find an actual human to talk to who understands context. LLMs are not therapists and should not be used as therapists, and I will die on that hill. All right. In lighter news, we're going to move on to our data breach section, and we're going to start with a really interesting kind of data breach I've never seen before. The headline says, hackers threaten to submit artist data to AI models if art site doesn't pay up. So this is a website called Artists and Clients that connects independent artists with interested clients, as the title implies. Around August 30th, a message appeared on the website attributed to the ransomware group LunaLock. They said, we have breached the website to steal and encrypt all its data. If you are a user of the website, you are urged to contact the owners and and insist that they pay our ransom. If this ransom is not paid, we will release all data publicly on this Tor site, including source code and personal data of users. Additionally, we will submit all artwork to AI companies to be added to training datasets. The article says most of Lunalock's threat is standard language for ransomware attack. What's new is the explicit threat to give the site's data, which includes the unique artwork and information of its users, to AI companies. It's unclear how Lunalock would get the artistic data to AI companies. Of course, it might be as simple as setting up an independent website full of the data on the open web and waiting for one of the LLM's crawlers to come and devour the information, or just starting a chat with the company's respective chatbots and uploading the images depending on each company's policy and how they train their AI based on user uploads.
This one's pretty quick. Chess.com disclosed a data breach via a file transfer app. This occurred in June, and it was happening for 2 weeks. And the incident affects only a small percentage of the platform's massive 100 million users, and it affected about 4,500 people. It includes names and other PII that have not been included in the sample notices, which they share with authorities. They noted that no financial information has been exposed, and it has no evidence that the stolen data has been publicly disclosed or misused yet. So pretty small breach, but still informing you all about it.
Next up, financial services firm Wealthsimple, can't talk tonight, discloses data breach. Founded in 2014 and headquartered in Toronto, the financial services firm holds over 84.5 billion Canadian dollars in assets, which is about 61 billion US dollars. It offers a wide range of financial products, targeting investments, trading, crypto, tax filing, spending, and savings to over 3 million Canadians. The Android app has over 1 million downloads, and the iOS app has over 126,000 ratings, so pretty popular app. Wealthsimple stated that the attackers did not steal any funds and did not compromise passwords, ensuring that all customer accounts remained secure. And this is a quote from their statement. They said, "We learned that a specific software package was written by a trusted third party has been compromised. This resulted in personal data belonging to less than 1% of our clients being accessed without authorization for a brief period. Data that was accessed was personal information like contact details, government IDs provided during the sign-up process, financial details such as account numbers, IP address, social insurance number, or date of birth." This was potentially a Salesforce data breach because Bleeping Computer said that it had all the call signs of a Salesforce data breach, but the company denied it. But then Bleeping Computer said that they found an inactive domain for a Salesforce product belonging to Wealthsimple. So it's like, okay, are you being technical here? Like, technically it wasn't Salesforce, it was Salesdrift, which is Salesforce's AI chatbot or something like that. So Salesloft Drift, because that's actually in our next set of stories. But yeah, just again, reminder, anything you put online could potentially be hacked. We're not encouraging fraud, but just be mindful of what services you sign up for and don't spread your data all over the place like a, I don't know, paintball or something. And on the topic of Salesforce, we're going to sum up these last 4 because they're all Salesforce data breaches. And again, this is like a cascading. Salesforce had a data breach, so now all these companies are breached because of the third party. So there's Zscaler, which I think is a cybersecurity company, was compromised after the Salesloft Drift bot was hacked. Palo Alto Networks had a data breach exposing customer info and support cases. Cloudflare had a data breach, again from Salesloft Drift. And software as a service giant Workiva discloses data breach after Salesforce attack. If you think you've been impacted by any of those, go ahead and check the show notes.
Okay, and now we are going to get into the companies, and this one is pretty fresh. So X/Twitter is now offering end-to-end encrypted chat. And this is the article. You probably shouldn't trust it yet. So we'll dig into that. You can find this by going into the messages panel, and then there's like a chat within messages. It's a bit bizarre. But in XChat, once a user clicks on Setup Now, X prompts them to create a 4-digit PIN, which will be used to encrypt the user's private key. This key is then stored on X's servers. The private key is essentially a secret cryptographic key assigned to each user, serving the purpose of decrypting messages. As in many end-to-end encrypted services, a private key is paired with a public key, which is what a sender uses to encrypt messages to the receiver. This is the first red flag for XChat. So Signal, for example, stores a user's private key on their device, which is why it's called end-to-end encryption. You set it up on your devices, and the encryption key is stored locally on each device, not on their servers. X, on the other hand, stores it on the servers. So I don't even know if end-to-end encryption is quite accurate in this instance. But Matthew Garrett, a security researcher, wrote that if the company doesn't use hardware security models or HSMs to store the keys, then the company could tamper with the keys, brute forcing them, for example, since they're only 4 digits, and potentially decrypting messages. HSMs are servers made specifically to make it harder for the company that owns them to access the data inside. An ex-engineer said in the post in June that the company does use HSMs, but neither he nor the company has provided any proof. Until that's done, this is trust us bro territory. story, which is actually from the guy who says that, which is funny because that's what we say about Telegram. It's just trust us, bro, energy. Now, it doesn't really end here. The second red flag, which X admits, is that the current implementation of the service could allow a malicious insider or X itself to compromise encrypted conversations. They said X gives you the public key whenever you communicate with them. So if they've implemented this properly, you can't prove they haven't made up a new key and perform a man-in-the-middle attack. That is self-admitted, by the way. Another red flag is that none of XChat's implementations at this point is open source, unlike Signals or any of the other main messengers that we talk about. X says it does aim to open source their implementation and describe the encryption technology through a white paper later this year, so it will be exciting to see that once they publish it. Finally, X doesn't offer perfect forward secrecy, which is essentially how if one message's encryption keys get compromised, the other messages won't also be compromised. The researcher says XChat is at a point where users shouldn't trust it yet. If everyone involved is fully trustworthy, the X implementation is still technically worse than Signal. And that's assuming everything is perfect and trustworthy. And he says even if they were fully trustworthy to start with, they could stop being trustworthy and compromise trust in multiple ways. If they were either untrustworthy, or incompetent during initial implementation, it's impossible to demonstrate that there's any security. I think most people here know we're not the biggest fans of Twitter. We like open source things, we like federated things, we like things that give you all better control of your lives and your data, and trusting any centralized company that has access to all of your data who has poor implementations like things like this are not going to be things we're going to recommend to you guys. With that said, we want to see this get better. Like, I would love to see this become open source. I'd love to see them improve the encryption. I'd love to see, like Twitter users who send a lot of DMs, get access to better end-to-end encryption. But as of right now, this isn't that different from Telegram in some ways. It's very trust us bro energy. They're not using best practices, and you're just simply better off, factually better off, with other services that just have better practices by default. So those services can include Signal, SimpleX, Session, Threema, and even Matrix. Like I think I'd use Matrix well before I ever use this for anything sensitive. And the last thing I want to say here, this doesn't need to be better than those messengers, right? Like when people use Twitter, they're not trying to have the best privacy, otherwise they wouldn't be on Twitter. So I think it's fine if this isn't as good or better than things like Signal, but I still would like this to get to a point where it's good enough to actually give the security that Twitter users probably want. That's my as balanced as possible take that I can give here.
We're going to move on to research, and we only have one story this week, and it's kind of more of an update than an actual like new story. It says this is a research paper, and it's titled "Android Droppers: The Silent Gatekeepers of Malware." So I'll quote the abstract here, and then maybe summarize if it needs it. Droppers have long been a cornerstone of Android malware campaigns. They're small, seemingly harmless apps whose real job is to fetch and install a malicious payload. Historically, these were most widely used in families like banking Trojans and at times remote access Trojans or rats. These threats leaned on droppers to slip past upfront scanning and later request powerful permissions such as accessibility service upon installing the payload without drawing attention. In recent months, Threat Fabric, who wrote this research paper, have observed a clear shift. Alongside banking Trojans, droppers were also used in campaigns delivering relatively simple malware, such as SMS stealers and basic spyware, often disguised as government or banking apps in India and other parts of Asia. At first glance, that feels like overkill. These families don't necessarily rely on accessibility abuse, so why distribute them in a dropper at all? Our research points to two main drivers. First, Google Play Protect's defenses, particularly the targeted pilot program, are increasingly effective at stopping risky apps before they run. Second, actors want to future-proof their operations. By encapsulating even basic payloads inside a dropper, they gain a protective shell that can evade today's checks while staying flexible enough to swap payloads and pivot campaigns tomorrow. So, to put that in English, some malware will install an app. Once you've installed the app, Google Play has that thing where they scan the app to see if it's malicious, right? So a lot of malware developers will create an app that on initial install doesn't do anything bad. So Play Protect will scan it and say it's not asking for weird permissions, it's not contacting any known servers, it's not doing anything weird, it's fine. After it's installed and it passes that check, then it calls home and downloads the actual malware. And basically all they're saying is we're seeing a real spread in this because Google Play Protect is so good at what it's doing that they're having to resort to different what's the word I'm looking for? Different tactics. So it's just a constant cat and mouse of malware. I just thought it was really interesting research if you guys want to read the full article. And just a reminder that defense in depth is always the way to go. You shouldn't rely on just virus scanning or just like your DNS blocker. Like, you really have to be mindful of what you're putting on your device and try to have multiple levels of defense available where you can.
All right, and now I promised you all at the beginning a juicy politics section, and I will surely deliver. So we're going to start with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They have reactivated a contract with spyware maker Paragon. So yeah, we've talked about Paragon a lot, so this is a bit unfortunate news for just overall surveillance. Shortly after, the Biden administration put the contract under review, issuing a stop work order to determine whether it complied with an executive order on commercial spyware, which restricts the US government agencies from using spyware that could violate human rights or target Americans abroad. Almost a year later, when it looked like the contract would run out and never become active, ICE lifted the stop work order. And yeah, the contract is for a fully configured proprietary solution, including license, hardware, warranty, maintenance, and training. And they have years cultivated the image of being an ethical and responsible software maker. This is in reference to Paragon, in contrast with controversial spyware purveyors such as Hacking Team, Intellexa, and NSO Group. On its official site, Paragon claims to provide its customers with ethically based tools, teams, and insights. In January, WhatsApp revealed that around 90 of its users, including journalists and human rights workers, had been targeted with Paragon's spyware called Graphite. In the following days and weeks, Italian journalist Francesco Cancellato and several local pro-immigration activists came forward saying they were among the victims. So this has been a very big theme that's important for all of you to follow in the last 5 to 10 years. This whole relationship between spyware makers and governments is a very concerning one, because you're essentially giving the ability to hack into anybody's phone to a government. So if it's a government that you like or don't like, again, this was actually started during the Biden administration, and it's still going on now through the Trump administration. So this is a pretty bipartisan thing when it comes to who's behind this. This is something we see globally, not just in the US. And when it comes to the Italian journalist, I believe that was actually suspected of coming from the Italian government, targeting that journalist. A lot of these companies try to present themselves as ethical, but at the end of the day, their entire business model is selling the ability to hack into people's phones to governments that have zero transparency about when they're using these tools. So there, in my view, is no way to do this that is ethical and transparent. There's just no way to do it. And I think that's why this is simply an unethical thing to do. That's really all I have. There are other ways to actually prosecute people and get a warrant if you feel like they are people who should be arrested for something that they're doing. Hacking their phone secretly with software that you purchased secretly is not the way to do that.
All right, next up, US sues robot toy maker for exposing children's data to Chinese developers. So a complaint filed by the Justice Department following a notification from the Federal Trade Commission alleges that Apitor violated the Children's Online Privacy Protection Rule, or COPPA, by failing to notify parents or obtain their consent before collecting their children's location information. Apitor sells robot toys for children ages 6 to 14 and provides users with a free Android app that helps control the toy robots. To connect and use the toys, users must enable location sharing. However, the app also embeds JPush, a third-party software development kit, or SDK, developed by, I'm going to screw this up, Zhiguang, also known as Aurora Mobile, not to be confused with the Aurora store that we recommend, which has been used to collect the precise location data of thousands of children since at least 2022 for any purpose, included targeted advertising. Under a proposed settlement, Apitor will be required to ensure that any third-party software it uses also complies with COPPA and pay a $500,000 penalty. Although the penalty will be put on hold due to Apitor's ongoing financial difficulties, the company will have to pay the full amount if it was dishonest about its finances. Additional requirements include notifying parents before collecting data, obtaining their consent, deleting all collected personal information, and retaining data only as necessary. So I have to assume collecting all that data didn't really work out for them anyway.
Texas is suing PowerSchool over the breach that exposed 62 million students, including 880,000 Texans. So this is from the Texas Attorney General, and they filed a lawsuit against PowerSchool. They are an education software company, and it exposed all those people that I just talked about. This is for K through 12 schools and districts, and they have tons of customers with millions of students worldwide, and we covered this breach. So if you're a regular on this podcast, you might have remembered when we covered this back in January. They disclosed this breach and that the portal was breached breached on December 19th using a subcontractor's stolen credentials. The attacker demanded a ransom, and they stole the full names, physical addresses, phone numbers, passwords, parent information, contact details, social security numbers, and medical data of impacted students and faculty. So the failures violate both the Texas Deceptive Trade Practices Act and the Identity Theft Enforcement and Protection Act by misleading customers about its security practices and failing to take reasonable measures to protect sensitive information entrusted by Texas families and school district. And that quote there is from the Office of the Attorney General. Not much of an update to this. We'll see what happens, and we'll definitely cover any updates in this podcast, so stay subscribed.
Next up, Disney has to pay $10 million to settle claims it collected kids' data on YouTube. So basically just a lot of big tech lawsuits this week. So this occurred after the entertainment giant failed to tag kid-directed videos on YouTube as Made for Kids, or MFK, which is a label that instructs the video streaming platform to block personal data collection and stop serving personalized ads on correctly designated content to protect children's privacy as required by COPPA. Disney also failed to correctly designate children-focused content despite YouTube alerting the entertainment giant that it switched labels in 2020 for over 300 videos from not made for kids to made for kids, including some with music and visual content from The Incredibles, Coco, Toy Story, Frozen, and Mickey Mouse. Besides the $10 million civil penalty, the settlement will also require Disney to notify parents before collecting kids' personal information and to implement a new program designed to ensure that videos posted to YouTube are designated as made for kids, thereby preventing unlawful data collection in the future.
Yeah, and then this is pretty quick. So France has slapped Google with a 325 million euro fine for violating cookie regulations. So this is from 2022 and 2023. They found that Google's Gmail email service displayed advertisements in the promotions and social tabs without the consent of users, and so they now have to pay up. So that's pretty much that story. And then since that one was pretty quick, I'm just going to move on to the next section, which is free and open source, FOSS. And we're going to start with Switzerland, who has released an open source AI model built for privacy, and it's called Apertus. It's a multilingual LLM trained on 15 trillion tokens and over 1,000 languages. And unlike proprietary models, they provide open access to its model weights, training datasets, documentation, and even intermediate checkpoints. The source code and all training materials are released under a permissive open source license that allows commercial use. And since the full training process is documented and reproducible, researchers and watchdogs can audit the data sources, verify compliance with data protection laws, and inspect how the model was trained. Their development explicitly adhered to Swiss data protection and copyright laws and incorporated retroactive opt-out mechanisms to respect data source professionals or preferences. It also only uses publicly available data, and it's filtered to exclude personal information and to honor opt-out signals from content sources. This not only aligns with emerging regulatory frameworks like the EU AI Act, but also provides a tangible example of how AI can be both powerful and privacy respecting. According to ETH Zurich's Emanuel Schlag, I'm totally butchered that, I bet. He's a technical lead. He said this is built for the public good and is a demonstration of how AI can be deployed as a public digital infrastructure, much like utilities or transportation. And he is definitely saying that as a person from Switzerland, because that is not the way it is in the US either for utilities or transportation. The model is available via Swisscom's sovereign Swiss AI platform. It's also available through Hugging Face and the public AI inference utility. So this is super cool. I would love to see more of this, and I think AI would have a much better reputation if it wasn't run by these massive for-profit, multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar companies behind them. So yeah, I think this is super cool. And actually, when I first read this, I thought to myself at first, like, oh, was this something that Proton helped the government with? But it seems like this is completely separate from Proton and Lumo, as far as I can tell.
I think I'll go ahead and take the next two stories as well, because these are also very short. The first one, interestingly, does come from Proton. We were just talking about them for if we kept that in the patron section. The headline says, easily import photos and albums from Google Photos to Proton Drive on Windows. So with the latest Windows app update, you can import albums and pictures from Google Photos with to a cloud storage that protects your privacy with end-to-end encryption. This does require exporting all your photos using Google Takeout first. And it also says later in the article, quote, you can now import photos from any folder using the Proton Drive app for Windows. Albums are created automatically, so your pictures stay organized from the start. Great news, I guess, if you're trying to migrate from Google to Proton. This is another thing that makes it just a little bit easier, and I always applaud that. Okay, and the last one is also pretty quick. Firefox 32-bit Linux support will end in 2026. So this was a pretty short blog post. I'm going to quote most of it here. For many years, Mozilla has continued to provide Firefox for 32-bit Linux systems long after most most other browsers and operating systems ended support. We made this choice because we care deeply about keeping Firefox available to as many people as possible, helping our users extend the life of their hardware and reduce unnecessary obsolescence. Today, however, 32-bit Linux is no longer widely supported by the vast majority of Linux distributions, and maintaining Firefox on this platform has become increasingly difficult and unreliable. To focus our efforts on delivering the best and most modern Firefox, we are ending support for 32-bit Linux with the release of Firefox 144. Or, to rephrase, Firefox 145 will not have 32-bit Linux support. Quick note, I really appreciate them putting that rephrasing there because sometimes I struggle with that kind of stuff too. The article says for users who cannot transition immediately, Firefox ESR 140 will remain available, including 32-bit builds, and will continue to receive security updates until at least September of 2026.
All right, and now we're going to go into the Misfits. We have a fun one. I always get these fun ones. There's an automated, if we weren't demonetized for the first story, it definitely will be the last. Automated sextortion spyware takes webcam pics of victims watching porn. So researchers at security firm Proofpoint published their analysis of an open source variant of an infostealer malware known as Stealerium?
Stealerium, yeah.
Stealerium?
I don't know.
It sounds like a Captain America, like whatever his shield's made out of. There's a whole thing about this because apparently in the movies it's vibranium, but that's not what it's made of in the comics. So,
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's made out of the one that starts with an A. Yeah, I'm a huge Marvel nerd, as you guys can tell.
Oh, the same one that Wolverine's claws are made out of?
Yes.
Adamantium.
Yes.
Interesting. I wonder why they changed it in the movie. I wonder if it was a copyright thing or like a rights thing.
I don't know. But I'm sure some Marvel nerd in the comments will let us know.
Let me know. I want to know.
Anyway, this malware, like all infostealers, is designed to infect the target's computer and automatically send a hacker a wide variety of stolen sensitive data, including banking, usernames and passwords, and keys to victims' crypto wallets. This, however, adds... Stealerium is a little bit different because it adds a more humiliating form of espionage. It also monitors the victim's browser for web addresses that include certain NSFW keywords, screenshots browser tabs that include those words, photographs of the victim via their webcam while they're watching those pages, and sends all the images to a hacker who can then blackmail the victim with the threat of releasing them. In the hacking campaigns Proofpoint analyzed, cybercriminals attempted to trick users into downloading and installing it as an attachment or a web link, luring victims with typical bait like a fake payment or invoice. The emails targeted victims inside companies in the hospitality industry as well as in education and finance, though Proofpoint notes that users outside of companies were also likely targeted but wouldn't be seen by its monitoring tools. So yeah, be careful with emails, be careful with any kind of phishing attempts. But yeah, that's all we have for the week. ChatGPT is sending your messages to the police. Very difficult story to cover. X/Twitter is rolling out some end-to-end encrypted messaging that we did discuss. Lots of politics this week and quite a bit more. We don't have any sponsors this week, and so this episode is brought to you guys by all of you listeners, all of you viewers, people who are on Patreon, people who support us via LibraPay or Monero or XMR Chat. We literally couldn't do this podcast without all of your guys' support. This really is a big community effort. So if you get value from this, definitely consider supporting us down in the description via any of those methods. And now, as Nate said earlier, we have a new method, which is Ghost. Right now, we're not planning to really change any of our hosting necessarily, and everything should stay the same for you guys, but we're looking to at least emulate Ghost and use it for memberships so that you guys can subscribe there instead of Patreon, and you have one less party in between us that's also taking fees and gives us a little bit more control over our little ecosystem. If you're not interested in any of that, that's okay. We still want to thank you for listening. Links, as always, can be found down below to all the stories that we covered, and you can always submit stories at the email on our website. And the final thing we want to ask all of you to do, whether you support us or not, is share this around with people. We don't run ads, we don't run any kind of marketing stuff. Like, this is something, like, we both have our projects and we both come together each week to work on surveillance support. And this is something that we just want to keep growing organically, and you guys and word of mouth and sharing it with friends and family is like the #1 way to support this, as well as leaving ratings. We checked our ratings on Apple Podcasts, and you guys are awesome. So that's all I got to say there.
And on Spotify too.
And on Spotify.
Yeah.
So thank you all for the high reviews, and it's really appreciated, and we're just happy that you guys get value from this podcast. We'll see you again next week.